I will start to introduce myself. My name is Rob Bishti. I'm CEO of Bossbeck, and my role in this session is to explain why we have created this Bossbeck workflow engine and give you an overview of how it is used. And I leave it over to Johan here, who can present himself.
Yeah, so I'm Johan, and I will be building the workflow and show you how the workflow how it works and build the solution for you today.
Perfect. So I will share my screen here. So Bossbeck it's a platform to automate your business with Bossbeck. And it's actually 4 capabilities we got here in order to automate in the best effective way as possible. One of the capabilities, integration. Integration can be done in several, but mostly we are doing it with HTTP. But it could also be that some systems send a mail and we get the metadata from the mail, or it could be a file or other ways to integrate it. The other part is the automation part, to create rules and create automation so you can structure the data and get the new data into the system. And the third capability is the communication part. In many ways you need to communicate, and we have different kind of way to communicate. It could be an SMS, a mail, or an HTTP call to communicate between system or to other persons, for instance. And the fourth one is the low code capability. The reason we have low code is because you need to have a tool in order to automate, to make it fast and make it happen, your digital solution. And the low code, we are using it as Lego, so you build up your solution that way. If you look at the problems for all businesses, we know that this is based on the Gartner report, but we know, for instance, that 60% of all IT solution will never be done due to various reasons, such as complexity. It could be big. It could be that it's a too big project, line of business doesn't have time, etc. And going further, 90% of this 60% is usually it's because it demands some kind of integration automation between systems to get it happen, and only 17% of managers thinks they can produce digitalization fast enough. This is a huge problem which can be solved with the Bossbeck platform to make it easier, to make it faster, and to make it cheaper. Looking at the whole solution, it's actually we are getting information out and in from different kind of system. It could be also sensor or whatever. And then we are building the solution in form of blocks. I usually call it Lego, for instance. It could be jobs and triggers, and then you connect them together and you get a process, and then you will have an automation part done. So the design process when you build your automation is according to this picture. We have this authentication incoming, and the authentication incoming, it could be, we have different kind of incoming channel, like HTTP, it could be email, or it could be SMS, or it could be a file, for instance, or MQTT. And then we have the token to authenticate it. It's open channel when we get the incoming data. So because the next step, we can handle the data in a different kind of way. The next step is to start a process, and usually we call it triggers. There is a different kind of triggers that can be used, like incoming trigger, like HTTP trigger, email, SMS. It could be a scheduling trigger, or it could be a form data trigger or evaluation of data trigger, for instance. And then we trigger a process to get it going. And the next step when we're building up the data model is the incoming data. And we could have any structure, it could be any structure like JSON, XML, CSV, email, SMS, form data, for instance. And it will be handled through the process or through the flow. And we build it through different kind of jobs. And then we have the structured data. The structured data could need to be converted, for instance, or restructured, or to add information. So we pick up the incoming data, we can store the data, and add different kind of stored data, for instance, and define the data that should be used. You will see how it builds a little bit more when Johan is showing you. I just going through this, the design process here. And then we have this stored data. We have a possibility to create your own data model through key and value, and create your own structure with metadata, for instance. And also we have a different kind of way to store it. We can store it in a unit, or we can store it in data log or file. And the outgoing data, we handle different kind of authentications. It could be username, password, it could be OAuth, or 2.0 basic auth, or whatever, to handle the authentication seamless. And beside this, we have different kind of supporting functions like messages, templates, forms to build different kind of forms if you would like to add data like a verification. We have an app connected to it, so you can use the app. And we have also, when you need some kind of interface, in some cases, we create services, and we also have templates for the workflow, so it goes really fast to build it up. And if it's things that's going to communicate and be part of the process, we have this kind of devices. So the last part I want to discuss is how do we deliver. It's actually 3 parts I think is important. It's the workflow engine itself, and in order, and it runs in many instances, and it's no need for any deployment or compilation. We also handle different kind of versions in it, so you can roll it back if something goes wrong, for instance, and log all history. Another important part is the security and safety part. To handle different kind of automations. We have our own VPC. All the disks are encrypted. We do backups all the time. And also an important part is we complies with ISO 27001. Another part regarding this automation, when you have different kind of data flowing back and forth, is the scalability. We are the whole platform built through microservices, so we can add new technology when it comes to new technology. We have multiple application servers, and it's also queue management and load balancing in order to handle the scalability issues. So I think that's what's my part, and now we will go over to discuss how it's built, and Johan will go through you with that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen as well. Should be able to see it now. So I'm gonna show you how to build, first of all, build a smaller integration towards a simulated customer database, basically, where we send a post message to create a customer, and we get the data from an older system. So we're simulating that perhaps you need to move your customer data from one system to another, and we'll start out small with a similar structure on both ends. And make it more complex by adding more realistic JSON, and then we'll look into switching the the format to XML as well. So this is the Bossbygg admin that you're seeing now. And on this page, you have multiple different tools to work with. You have your workflows, have services that Rod mentioned earlier as well, and you have your statistics. But since we're going to look at the workflows, I will head over to that page, and I'll create a new one. I'll just give it a name. Just create a new one and leave it empty. So first of all, we need to have a look at what we actually want to accomplish. So I have a few examples here where we have simulated these customer databases. So first of all, we have a request here that you can do a post to the demo destination system, and I have prepared it to be following a certain structure that you might see in a typical scenario. So we want to create a new customer with first name, last name, email, and if it's active or not. When we do this, we get a response saying that it has been created with this customer ID. So when we get the data from our current system, we might do a get request here. And in this case, we're going to get the data formatted in the same way that the new system wants it, which is very convenient and probably not very realistic, but it provides a good starting point. So let's start by building the workflow that gets this data. So we can see that we have data sent in an array with multiple users. So first of all, I'll drag out a trigger that Rod was speaking about earlier. This is the way you start your workflow. I'll name this import members. And in this case, this is just an execution or an executing workflow trigger that allows you to do this manually. But oftentimes you might want to schedule the executions for certain intervals, or you might want to trigger on incoming SMSs or such. We have triggers for that as well. So since we want to do a HTTP request with a get to get all the data, I'll drag out a new job and I'll search for HTTP. In this case, I know that I'm looking for something called HTTP, so I'm just searching for it, but you might also take a look through the categories here and find it yourself. So I'll connect this up and I'll open the properties window for this job. And these are the settings that we need to input. And I'll head over to Postman and I'll grab the URL. It's this here. Since we're doing a get, I'll just leave this the way it is. But we also need to provide an authorization token. So I'm going over to headers and I'll just copy the headers here. Since we're doing a get, we don't need a body, and I'll just leave this response name as it is. This is where when we've sent the request, we will get the response in a resource that we can use. So I'll save this. I'll toggle the workflow and I'll click run. Make sure I have the import members trigger selected and then hit run. So this is I usually, when I build a workflow, I usually build it in steps and I try it along the way. So we can see here that I have one execution, and if I click this, a number of windows opens up, which is the data we have available in this particular execution. So you can see it as a scope or a context where we can work with the data. First of all, we have the metadata, which are basically our key value variables that are present. We have execution stories. This story tells you what happened during the execution of this workflow. And currently we have only executed one job, but we first sent the request and then we got the response here. This also gives you information about what is done. So in this case, it sends a warning saying that there's no job to do anything after this request is done, because we haven't configured that. So we can just ignore that for now. And then we have the available resources here. And we can see, first of all, we have a current user, and that is the logged in user. And we have HTTP response. So this is the response we got from the simulated API. And in this, we can see that we have an array with John Doe and Jane Smith. So to be able to work with this data, we need to convert it into a JSON resource. So I'll drag out a new job, and I'll search for parse. You can see here we have parse JSON to resource. Perhaps you might have searched for JSON if you weren't sure what you were looking for, but so we have parse JSON to resource. I'll hook this up, and you can see this window opens up automatically. And this happens when arrows have their own setting. So if there is a condition that needs to be met for this path to be followed. So we can see that this is jobs to execute after a successful response, and which is, in this case, it is a 200. But it might be an unsuccessful response, or we might not want to wait for a response before we carry on. But I'll leave it as successful. I'll open up the parse JSON resource. It's already helped us by creating a name for the destination resource. This is the JSON resource that we will be working with later in the workflow. But we need to configure where we want to get the data from. And this is done by selecting typing the resource name .body, because as we saw earlier, we can see that in this resource we have the body, and then we have the array, and we want to grab that array. I'm putting that in the JSON resource. I'll save the workflow. I'll just move the marker manually over here because the workflow has already been completed, so it's not going to carry on, but I can move this to any job I want to trigger again and just carry on from there. So I'm doing that, and I'll step. We can see it has run parse JSON to resource, and we have a JSON resource now with an array in that we can be working with. And we want to send this as a post request to the other system. So I'm grabbing one of the send HTTP request jobs again. And this time I want to grab the other URL here. I'm changing the method to post. Once again, I'm grabbing the API key as well. But in this case, we want to add a body because it's a post. So we need to create the body for it. So I'm going to grab a job, search for JSON again, and I'm going to use JSON pipeline. And a pipeline job is it's usually using a resource to do a certain amount of tasks before carrying on. And so in this case, we want to build a JSON that looks like the request that the API wants. So I'm going to copy this body. I'll add a step called transform. So I'm going to transform a JSON. I'll just paste this in. This time I'm going to check this syntax alt1 because this is the syntax that we're going to move to. So this is going to be replaced later, but I'm going to do it for now. And then I'll create a new JSON resource and save as resource, new member JSON. I'm calling this new member JSON. But this is now not dynamic. This is just me entering data, and we want to loop over this array and do this once for every user in the database. So this array, and to iterate over a resource, we have something called for each. So for each resource start and for each resource stop. We can define a resource to loop over. So I'm going to go for JSON resource. I'm gonna call, so every time we grab one of these, we're gonna have to call that item something. I'm gonna call it current JSON object. This up. So I'm gonna run this job again. So just the first for each resource start. We can see we now have, instead of having an array with 2 things, we have one with only John Doe that we can work with. I'll connect this. Once again, we have one of these automatic pop-ups for each job. We also have for each after it's completed, we want to go a different path. But I'll open up the JSON pipeline, and this is so we want to grab John from current JSON object. So if I replace this, so the syntax here is double curly brackets, then the resource name, and then since this is in the top level, we can just type dot first name. We can, since we want to do this for all the fields, we can just copy this and paste it in each value, and just replace the key over here to the one we want. So if I run this once, we should see that we have new member JSON with the correct data. So this has now been, we grabbed this dynamically. I also see that I forgot to switch it. So in the send HTTP request we are doing now, we want to call this response something else, so we can use it later. So I'm going to call it members response. There's a way you can force it to look for a certain type of response, but I'm going to look for auto because it's going to be JSON. I'm saving this, running the job. And we now see that we have a new response called members response. It's a status code 200, and we have a customer ID. So this means it worked out for us. We have created a new one in the new system. And then we're going to want to go back and do this for Jane Smith again. So we're adding for each resource stop. Hooking this up. Saving that. And you can see that the marker selects the start job, so it's going back there. It's replacing the current JSON object with Jane Smith instead. And we can just step through this. And it's created it's 200 and created a new customer ID. So this is basically a perfect world scenario where one system wants one format and the other system wants the same. But that's usually not how it goes. It's usually at least a different format. So to show this, we have set up a different endpoint, members JSON 2 here. So if I run this, we're getting data that is more similar to real world data. So we have an ID and we have different data here. And the differences in this is that in this system we have name. We have no first name and last name. We just have a combined field name. We have email in the same way we had before. But instead of having active, true, or false, we have membership status active or inactive. So we have to transform this. To show this, I'm just gonna copy this workflow. Normally, you would probably just modify your workflow to suit your needs, but for this demonstration's case, I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm just gonna update the keys here again because it's these one copied. All right, so now we have the same thing again, but we need to change the URL here. I'm changing this to members.json2 instead. It's using the same details on the headers. And if we try to run this now, we should see that it created a new member.json, but it has the wrong data in here because it can no longer find it. It found the email address because this is in the same place. Let's see here, so the top level, but only email is the same. We need to replace the name field with first name and last name, and we need to convert the membership status from active to true. So if we start out, we can start by modifying the name, first of all. So if I just save and reload here. If we disconnect the for each start, and we drag out a job called data operation. And data operation is one of the more common jobs that we use because it has a lot of operations to transform and set data. In this case, let me just grab the resource again. Since we have a first name here and last name here, I figure we can make it easy for ourselves and just say that the first word in this field is the first name and the last word is the last name. And we can use a regex operation here then. So extract value regex. So if we just type the resource name, .name, so we're looking at the source resource.name. We want to grab the first word. So the regex pattern for this would be \w star. And this is you can use any regex tool to figure this out, but this is the way to grab the first word. I'm leaving first match, so I'm just grabbing the first one, and I'm going to save this to metadata.firstname. I then want to do the same thing for the last name. So I'll just hit the duplicate key here. I'll leave name and the pattern the same, but I'll switch the checkboxes here to last match. And I'll change the result destination to last name. So if we hook this up again, there, I can just stop it there so we can run it without it sending the request. I'll run trigger 2 again. And in the, oh, right, so I forgot. So we had the same issue again. We have the same current JSON object here. This is because I never switched the transformation. So if we look in the metadata, we have first name and we have last name. In this field, instead of looking at a resource, we want to look at the metadata for the workflow context. So I'm just going to type metadata.firstname. And I'm going to do the same on last name. Save it. So if I move the marker to this job again and run it again, we have new member JSON, and now it says John Doe and the email address. So we have to fix the active state. So I'm going to do this by, we have another job. Let me fix it again. We have another job called route from metadata, which is also quite useful. It's a job that allows you to choose a route depending on certain conditions that you specify. So if I hook this up, we get one of these automatic pop-ups again. where we can enter a name for the route. So we want to check if it's active, so I'm going to call it active. And opening up the previous run workflow execution here, we can have a look at the current JSON object where we're looking at. It says membership status active. So I'm going to look at current JSON object dot membership status, and if this equals active, we want to go this route. And all of these operators, you can find these on the help pages. I believe I have a link for that. Just look. There we go. So on the help pages, over there, we have the workflows page, and we have comparison operators or working with variables. This is basically what I'm going through now. I'm showing you how to use the metadata and the resources, and all of this is available on this web as well. So if you want to check up on this after the presentation, you can do so. But we have all the operators here, and I'm looking at the operators. So if this is active, we want to go this route, but we don't want to go straight for a JSON pipeline. We want to put another job between here. So I'm going to add a data operation again. Just move this arrow over here. And because we know that if this is active, we want the bool on this JSON pipeline. Just grab that job. So I want to replace this. So I say metadata.active. So I'm going to look for a metadata called active. So I'll copy this, and now add an operation called set data, where we can set data manually, or we can grab metadata from a different key and put that there. So I'm adding metadata.active and setting it to true. So if it goes this route, it will set that to active true, and we can use that in the JSON pipeline. So let me do another test. Save this. Well, new member JSON, and is now active true. So now we have the data in the format that the new API wants it. So we transformed it from this format, where name is the same field, but now we've split it into two, and we've converted membership active to active equals true. And in the cases where it's not active, we might want to handle that. So we can simply copy this data operation, and set this to false instead, and drag a new arrow here. So in this route for metadata, we could just actively set it. So if the membership status is inactive, we can go this route, or we can have it as a catch-all by changing this to route destination on no match. I'm doing that instead. So if anyone in the array would have anything else than active, we will set that to false. Then I hook it up to the request, and we can run this job again. And in the members response, hopefully we have a 200. Yep, so we have a 200 with the customer ID, and this was for John Doe. So in the same way, we would go back to the for each stop and go back and do the same conditions for Jane Smith. Looking at the member JSON, we see that it's now Jane Smith. So this is halfway there. So if we want to do the XML version for this, we can use basically the same workflow. We just need to modify it so it looks at a XML resource and uses the syntax for XML instead. So if I do this example instead, we're sending a request to members XML. we get the same data, but in XML format. So name is still in one field, and we have a membership status in another. So I'm just going to copy this again. So I'm getting a copy warning, and the copy warning is it tells us if it changed anything automatically when I copied it. Looking at this, I can see that the authorization header was changed, and this is because it's a GUID. So we're resetting all the GUIDs to an empty GUID, just so that it doesn't use the same. But in this case, this is wrong. So I'm just gonna copy it from the previous job. This. So now we have the same workflow again. So I'm going to switch the request here. So instead of looking at members JSON 2, we want to look at members XML. We can leave the rest as it is. And this is where the response type auto comes in handy. So it will figure out that it's an XML. And if I want to show you, I can show you what happens if I run trigger 3 here, and I run it in debug mode. It will just run the trigger and stop right here before it does anything else. So I'm gonna run this manually, getting a response in the way we would assume. So it's in XML format. And then we can run the next job. But now you can see that instead of having all these green checkboxes, we have a red warning here. Looking at the story, I can see that it could not find any JSON in the source. And that's to be expected because we're looking at an XML now. So we need to replace the parse JSON to resource job. So I'm just going to mark it as delete and enter. Drag out a new job. And since we're looking for something called XML, I'm just going to search for that. So parse XML to resource. I'm hooking this up again. And now we can use the same format that we did earlier. So we're still looking at the HTTP response.body, but we want to look in the XML. We want to save it to an XML resource instead. Saving this. Moving the marker to run this job instead. The job that pops up here is because we're in the workflow context that used this job, and now I've removed it. So it adds it temporarily to show you that there was a job here that we've been running. So I'm just going to run it again, and so we don't have to see that. Response. Do this here. Now an XML resource has been added instead of a JSON one. Hooking this up. This resource obviously we need to change the name for it, so it's XML resource again instead. The current XML object. I'm just gonna go through all of these jobs and fix the changes we need to do because we made this change in the beginning. Looking at the resource, its name has been changed, and since it's an XML resource, instead of doing .name, we need to add these greater than and smaller than. So it's a tag instead because that's the format of an XML. So I'm adding that around name. I'm adding the XML resource name again and doing the same thing here. We can still save this to metadata because that's our syntax. In the route, we were also looking at the previous resource name, and in the same way, I'm changing the tag here. We don't need to change anything here because we're setting this manually. And in the JSON pipeline, because we saved everything to the metadata, we don't need to change these because this is our syntax again, but we do need to change this resource to XML. and update that to that tag as well. Saving this. I'm running it again. I'm just gonna step through it because we're in debug mode. And hopefully we should see in the metadata now, in this job that we switch to the tags, we're still getting the name. So we can have a look at the current XML object. So we're looking at this this resource name. We're doing the same operations that we did earlier, but now in this time we're doing it with an XML resource. We're doing the same condition-based check for the active flag, creating the JSON. So now this time we only have one JSON resource because we're creating this. We can see John Doe with the email. And I'm going to send that in. We should see a 200 OK with a customer ID. So everything worked out, and we converted this to XML pretty easily. And we would do similar things if there were other differences. So maybe you're using Shopify or HubSpot or something. They might have one format. You need to transform it in this way when you send it on to the other. And if you want to check if there has been a HTTP request made, you can go back to the account and you can check the message history. So changing the filters here, you can add the HTTP requests to this. And you can see all the requests that's been sent from this account on this page. So you can click this and see that there was a GET request sent to this URL at this time. And this is the same for SMS or email or whatever you're sending or receiving. You can see all of these messages on this page. So I know that I kind of blasted through it, and I hope that you understood most of what I was doing at least. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask us or later and send it to support@bossbeck.com. I can type this out in the chat as well, in case you have any questions or you think of something while you're looking at it.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Johan. What we have done now is first to explain the overview why you should use Bossbeck, and then we have showed you some technical aspect how to build actual workflows, 3 different kind of workflows. In summary, the first one is the same kind of format going through one system to another. The second workflow is to show you how to change data with the same format, but different kind of data and change it. And the third workflow was to show you when you get different kind of format, XML, and then convert it to a JSON to get into the other system. To add to this, I mean, usually this is quite complicated things to build. And in this case, we showed you how technical you build it in the Bossbeck platform. And I would like to add that once you have built it, you can also create templates of it. You can save it and create templates. It goes very fast to build the new another one if it's kind of similar. Maybe you do some kind of small changes in it. So I would like to thank you all for being part of this session, and I hope it gave you a lot to think about. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please type it in the chat and we see if we can answer them. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice day. And if you need any support or help, just email support@bossbeck.com. It's really good having you here. Okay, bye.
Thank you.